All right, welcome back to Prayer of the Barren Womb. We are in part 36 of the Four Rivers of Eden and part 5 of As It Was in the Days of Abraham. What is unfolding for me as I am doing this study is that Abraham and Lot and the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah have become a very clear prophetic template for what the terminal generation is going to look like, but more specifically, what the family of God is going to look like in the judgment of God. And this is both dreadful and hopeful at the same time. And that's what I want to emphasize to anybody who stumbles upon this channel, is that there is a message of hope in this story and in understanding the prophetic template. I also want to remind anybody who's listening of Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, that tells us that God declares the end out from Genesis. So the Genesis narrative is a powerful prophetic template for what will happen downstream through the course of time. And here we are in Genesis 19, and I believe what we're looking at is a picture, a shadow type of what the end time generation is going to look like, and specifically what the people of God are going to look like. They're going to be divided very clearly up into two camps. Matthew 25 speaks of the two camps as the wise and foolish virgins. Matthew 13 speaks of the two camps as choked soil with weeds and deceitfulness of riches, and the good soil that actually bears a crop. So these two parables fit perfectly over the storyline of Abraham and Lot. And it's my encouragement to anybody who listens, what's your soil type? You know, and I'm preaching to me. I'm nobody. Please listen. I don't see myself as anybody, but just someone who's had an awakening, you know, slumbering in the gates of Sodom. And I'm having my turnaround right now. And my encouragement is to anybody who's hearing this message, begin to uproot your connections to Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be judged. We can clearly see that we are looking upon the things we are told to be watchful for in the terminal generation, as it was in the days of Noah, as it was in the days of Lot. I've already covered what I suspect those specific warnings speak to, and if my theory is accurate, we're seeing both of them and many more. Okay, so what I want to begin doing is I want to start with Genesis 19, and I want your ears to be tuned to parallel storylines. We've already discussed on this channel the tools that the Torah provides for the Torah reader to extract deeper understanding of the Torah. This is one of the magnificent beauties of a testimony, if you will, of the authorship that God wrote this book. Actually, it's not a book, it's a library. God wrote a collection of works for us. And within the works, within the Bible itself, are tools for extracting understanding of the Bible. That to me just declares that this book is a book like no other. It is authored by the very spirit and power of the Creator. Within the tools that the Torah provides for understanding the Torah, one of them is parallel storylines. When you see parallel events happening again, echoing from the past, you're intended to understand the two stories to be side by side, and that we can get a binocular understanding of each story as we evaluate it in the light of its previous telling. For example, Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and we go through day 1, day 2, day 3, blah, 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 all the way through to day 7. And there are specific events that happen, types of life, divisions that God makes on each day. We go to Genesis 7 and 8, following the great deluge, and we find the same events happening day 1, day 2, day 3, etc., all the way in lockstep with Genesis 1. We are intended as readers of the Torah to understand that these two stories are intended to be understood in light of each other. That's my example. I've gone through it in earlier videos. I realize that people just pop in for, just the, I understand that people go to YouTube and they just click on the latest video that shows up and they watch it, and there's no guarantee that they'll ever watch earlier stuff. So that's what I do. I'm not speaking to it. I'm just saying that's why I repeat myself for those of you who consistently follow. Anyhow, we have another parallel storyline. Two storylines that are almost in lockstep with each other. And the two storylines that I'm talking about are Genesis 18, followed immediately by Genesis 19. These are two hospitality narratives that are in lockstep with each other, and the Torah is shouting at us, we're intended to understand Genesis 18 in light of Genesis 19 and vice versa. So I want to go through the Genesis 19 right now with you and understand that we are hearing echoes of a previous story, and we're intended to understand these two stories together. And where there are subtleties and differences, the Torah is saying, look at the differences. Why are they there? We're challenged to consider deeply these two storylines together. So that's the backdrop. Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, and parallels are the two tools that we are going to use to extract deeper understanding as we go through Genesis 19. Okay, just as a review, Genesis 18, we have had what the sages, what Southern House, the Jewish people have preserved. The wisdom of their understanding of Genesis 18 is that it's the single greatest act of hospitality and kindness recorded for us in the book of Genesis. And what we find is Abraham is terribly sore 3 days following his self-circumcision event. He extends himself way above and beyond for kindness of strangers coming to visit his house. We find another hospitality event unfolding for us in Genesis 19. Immediately prior to Genesis 19, we have Abraham interceding before Yahovah, and my understanding is that he's interceding specifically for Lot and his family. If there are 10 righteous found in Sodom and Gomorrah, would you destroy the whole city for 10 righteous? The Lord says, no, I'll preserve Sodom and Gomorrah if there are only 10. And it turns out we don't even find 10. We don't even find 6. Only 3 make it with their skin out of Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's where we are. Genesis 19 picks up the narrative. Genesis 19, verse 1. Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. I just want to give you a preview of another reading of Genesis 19. Is not only its prophetic template for what the people of God will look like at the end of the age, when God is about to release a firestorm from heaven upon the evilness of the world. But Genesis 19 is also a retelling of another story that we've already heard. I don't want to confuse, I don't want to mix the two stories. I want us to exclusively view Genesis 19 in light of its prophetic template and understanding to end-time believers. But there's a whole other story that's unfolding here. A different story that's already been told. And I just want to give you a spoiler alert, or keep your heads up, keep your eyes open to another story that's unfolding. When's the last time in our Genesis narrative we encounter 2 angels? I think you already know. It's Genesis chapter 3. There were 2 angels that were guarding the way of the path of the tree of life so that Adam and Eve could not get into the garden. Now we have 2 angels again, and I believe the scripture is intending us to understand. I want you to just keep that on a back burner, but we're looking at 2 angels again. Okay, we're back to our Matthew 13, Matthew 25 prophetic template understanding of Genesis 19. These 2 angels are interesting all by themselves, simply as a juxtaposition against Genesis 18, where we find Abraham encountering how many divine beings? He encounters 3. My understanding is, for your consideration, my understanding is that's Yahovah and 2 very special angels. Yeah, my guess is that these 2 special angels that visit Sodom and Gomorrah are the 2 cherubim that God stationed at the entrance to the garden. That's the only other 2 angels in the entire Torah and the entire storyline up to this point. So that's for your consideration. But these 2 angels, what's interesting is that when we read the Genesis 18 encounter, I'll just go there real quickly. We find that the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, and he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. He lifted his eyes and he looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. So we've got time of day, we've got location, and we've got 3 very interesting beings that are coming to visit Abraham in Genesis 18, verse 1. Genesis 19, we have 2 very interesting beings. In the evening and in the gate. So already we can see 3 parallels between Genesis 19 and Genesis 18, but differences in each one of the parables. And I think each one of these differences tell us a story about Lot, something that we are intended to understand for ourselves, okay? If my theory is correct, that this story of Genesis 19 is a prophetic shadow of terminal generation, and we are terminal generation believers because we see the events of Noah and Lot unfolding before our very eyes. These are the specific warnings that our master gave to us. Then we need to pay very close attention to the differences between Abraham and Lot if we are going to extract ourselves from the gates of Sodom and move in to the tents of Abraham. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. Let's take a look at location first. This is not specifically in order, but what's coming up right now is, let's take a look at location. Once again, the emphasis on Abraham's dwelling is a tent. He's living in a temporary structure. The location of Lot's dwelling is a gate of a city. What are the differences between the door of a tent and the gate of a city? Is the temporary dwelling place of Abraham versus the permanent dwelling of Lot. Of course, it wasn't permanent, was it? But if you think of the difference between the lifestyle of Abraham versus the lifestyle of Lot, just in the understanding of temporary versus permanence. Lot was burrowed in. He was burrowed into his society. He was burrowed in to the gates. He was burrowed in. Gates are a very permanent structure that a society builds to protect itself. Rocks and heavy wooden beams and hinges and locks and things that keep you out and us in. And this is our system, and it's going to be here forever. Okay, so I think permanence and temporary are a juxtaposition between Abraham and Lot. And it's a sermon to us. Just this one word. What are we building? Where are we located? Are we in our minds and in our lives? Are we thinking that what we're building is permanent? I'm going to build a name for myself. I'm going to build an empire for me and my family, and we're going to dwell here forever, versus temporary. It's like, I don't know what my next assignment is. John 3, the classic chapter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John 3. Abraham is picturing for us what this looks like. In John chapter 3, Jesus says to Nicodemus, most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born of the water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. For that which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I say to you, you must be born again. And here's the verse. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from or where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. If we are to be Spirit-born, we need to develop an availability to God to pick up at a moment's notice. Everyone who is born of the Spirit is born aloft on the wind of the Spirit. You never know when that breeze of change is coming along into your life. Are your root systems so burrowed into Sodom that you can't move with the wind of the Spirit? Then you're dwelling in the gates of Sodom. I'm dwelling in the gates of Sodom. I'm preaching to myself. I have to be challenged by these words. Permanence versus temporary. Let's move over to Hebrews. So again, this is not in the notes. This is just rising up as I'm talking. Okay. Hebrews 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country. This was the land that was given to him. He was a king and he was walking on his domain. He dwelt as a foreigner, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. These were kings. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were kings of a domain, of a kingdom, and they were living lightly. They were living barely touching the ground. They weren't building castles. They weren't building infrastructure. They were dwelling in tents. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and from him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had the opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Permanence versus temporary. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were kings. They were kings of the land they were dwelling in and their feet were standing upon. This is the land that they had been promised, but they lived in tents. They never built castles. They never built societal structures. They knew that they had been promised these things from God. They knew that this was all theirs, but they lived as temporary dwellers, as strangers in a foreign land. Man, this is a sermon. This is a preach. This is what the opening verse of Genesis 19, the tents, Abraham dwelling in the doorway of his tent, Lot dwelling in the gate of Sodom. Man, I challenge you. I challenge me. Whoever's listening to this, evaluate your life. Think upon, are your goals, where are your goals? Are you detached enough from this realm so that when the slightest breeze of the Spirit lifts your wings, are you detached? Are you unrooted from Sodom to the point where you can be carried aloft on the wind of the Holy Spirit? Okay, I hope, like myself, you will think deeply on where your attachments are. I hope that you will prayerfully meditate upon your own, and with me, prayerfully meditate your own capacity to uproot, to be borne aloft on the wind of the Holy Spirit. I suspect there's nothing like it. Frightening, terrifying, exhilarating, hopeful, faithful. As you can tell, I myself don't have much experience of this, but I believe it's there for us. I believe one of the messages of Genesis 19 is to be so, just have your feet just lightly touching the ground of this wretched place. Barely touch the ground. And I don't know what that's going to look like for you. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for me. Anyhow, that's a meditation for us, isn't it? Okay, the next thing that I want to point out is time of day in the juxtaposition between Genesis 18 and Genesis 19. Time of day. Abraham was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. Lot is sitting in the gate of Sodom and in the evening when the visitors visit him. Time of day, the heat of the day, the brilliance of noon, the full direct light and energy of the sun is beating down on Abraham as he sits in the tent, in the doorway of his tent. The sun has shifted off to the west. Actually, off to, and Lot is sitting in the gate of Sodom in the evening. Evening in Hebrew is the word erev, and it literally means mixture. And you can see that. You can see that clearly. That evening is the mixture. It's the mixture of the previous day's sunlight and the mixture of the coming night's darkness. We have daylight and darkness coming together in the evening, and you have mixture. You have light and darkness mixed together, and it's called erev. And it was evening, and it was morning, day one. Lot is getting his divine encounter, his encounter with heavenly beings in the evening while dwelling in the permanent gates, so he thought, of Sodom. Evening, time of day. I suggest there's another sermon here. God is light, in him there is no darkness. Abraham sitting in the full light of day where there is no mixture. There's no mixture when the sun is directly over your head. You're enveloped in the pure, total light of the sun, which of course is a metaphor for a spiritual realm. Meanwhile, Lot gets his encounter in the mixture time of the day. And I suspect that this preaches to us what's going on with Lot. He's got mixture. He has the energy of light within him. He's been dwelling in the tents of Abraham. He'd been receiving instruction of the first monotheist, of the ways of God. He'd been watching Uncle Abraham in how Abraham conducted himself with guests, how Abraham conducted himself in business, in whatever capacity. So he's receiving instruction, but there's still mixture within him. There's still darkness. And what fellowship has light with darkness? You know, this is what, 1 Corinthians 3 or 4, something like that. So we're finding a man who's having diminished encounter with the divine realm in the evening. There is light and there is darkness going on, and I believe this to be a metaphor speaking to the condition of Lot's soul. And we're going to see this further. And I think mixture also speaks to the condition of soil type number 3 in Matthew 13. There's mixture there, isn't there? There's the life of the seed of the gospel is present in the soil of Matthew 13, soil type 3, but there's also the life and energy of the flesh and the deceitfulness of riches. There's weeds and thorns that are also present in soil type number 3 of Matthew 13. So once again, we see another parallel between Lot and Matthew 13, soil type 3. He's mixed. He's got mixture. He's got other concerns. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you, right? Lot is seeking other things. He's still mindful of the ways of God, and that'll become evident as we move through Genesis 19. But he's got drag. He's got anchors pulling him down to the earth. He's got concerns and cares of the world. He's got his riches to look after, his flocks to look after. He's got negotiations. He's got business deals. He's got all this stuff dragging him and distracting him from the main thing. So he has encounter with 2 heavenly beings instead of 3, which I believe speaks to a diminishment of revelation. You know, that obviously Yahovah was there in the negotiations with the 2 angels and Lot. He was fully present, but all Lot could see of the 3 beings were the 2 angels, the 2 angelic messengers. It's possible that God can only be seen in the full light of the sun, that as light diminishes and more mixture creeps in, Yahovah begins to fade. He's still fully there. He's still fully present. But as light diminishes, so does our perception of him. As darkness creeps in around the edges of our life, our perception of Yahovah is diminished. And so we have mixture, we have diminishment of perception of heavenly beings, and we have permanence. We got 3 features of Lot's life that are preaching to us that are subtle differences from Abraham. Okay, so the message that I'm providing, I'm speaking, I'm declaring to not only anybody who listens to this chapter, but I'm preaching to me too. These are 3 things we can evaluate within our own life to have a really close, hard, prayerful, intimate, repentant look into our own lives. What is the permanence? How much light are we allowing into our life? You know, where are we dwelling? How much light is in our encounters with the heavenly realm? So far we're in Genesis 19 verse 1. There's 3 sermons, there's 3 meditations for us right here in Genesis 19 verse 1. And here's another one. We've got when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and he bowed himself with his face towards the ground. Okay, so we have this extravagant display of, you know, subservience and, you know, humility. And we look at the difference between Abraham's encounter. And so he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. So we have a subtle difference here as well, don't we? We have Abraham maximizing time available for service to strangers in his getting up and running. And we don't find the extravagant language of bowing himself down with his face to the ground. We find that with Lot. Lot simply rises up. It appears as though the strangers draw near to him. Instead of him running out to meet the guests, to maximize the amount of time of service to strangers, he simply rises, they approach, and he has this big gesture of bowing his face down to the ground. I believe that this speaks this preaches to us of what is in Lot's heart is externals as opposed to internals. I believe what we're seeing here in Lot is an overemphasis on display and what the outside is seeing of him. Rather, where is his kindness actually coming from? He's dwelled in the tents of Abraham for who knows how many years. He knows what Abraham does when guests arrive. So he's got tick mark Torah. Okay, Abraham did this, I can do that. Abraham did this, I can do that. So he's got tick mark Torah, and that's a good thing. That's a good start. We need the instructions of God, and we need to start aligning our lives with the instructions of Torah. But it doesn't always come from a place of pure heart. I believe our journeys begin, well, I can only speak to myself, our journeys begin from a place of mixture. We emerge from darkness and into light. And so this was what I believe we're seeing in Lot is he's doing tick mark Torah. He understands what his uncle did when strangers came, and he can do that too. He said, come in and have a meal, wash your feet, be blessed, refresh yourself. He saw all that Abraham had done. He can do it too. But I believe what we're seeing is a mimic. We're not seeing the real deal, and we'll get to that. We'll see how the difference between a mimic and genuine kindness. We're going to see that as we move forward. So I think this is one of the things that we can also be aware of as we return to obedience to God, as we begin to enter the tents of Abraham. Our efforts are going to be rote. Many times there's just white knuckling it through the Sabbath day, which I've begun to learn to keep. The Sabbath day hasn't changed. It's not Sunday. Sabbath has never changed. Okay, deal with it. Walk your own journey. A 12-year-old kid in Wikipedia can figure this out. Okay. Anyhow, so as I begin my journey back towards the tents of Abraham, I realize and I understand and have grace for myself and my wife and others who are on this Torah pursuant path, going back to the ancient paths of wisdom, coming out of the lies that we inherited from our fathers. These are all speak to Northern House. Everything that I'm telling you speaks to Northern House. As we do that, there's going to be days where you're okay, I don't really feel like keeping Sabbath. Okay, okay, I'm going to do it. Okay, we're doing it, but we have mixture in our heart. We don't yet understand or have full light of revelation of how beautiful the Sabbath is and how it's not burdensome. It's light. It's a delight. I delight to do your will, O God. David was speaking of the Torah. I read Psalm 119. He's speaking of the Torah. Every meditation in Psalm 119 is another verse to the beauty of Torah, to the wonder of Torah. Open my eyes that I can see the wonders of your Torah. Psalm 119, verse 18. It's a prayer that I've prayed over me for years now. And this is what's happening. What I'm sharing with you are the wonders of the Torah. It's happening. God is answering my prayer right now, and you are experiencing God answering my prayer. Open my eyes to see the wonders of the Torah. Okay. Once again, this was unexpected, and I think I want to cut this off right about here. But the takeaway for Genesis 19, I really am encouraging myself and anybody who's listening, deeply meditate upon the differences between Abraham and Lot, and just the subtle. There's parallel. You can see parallel after parallel. Place, time of day, number of heavenly visitors, hospitality narrative. You can see parallel after parallel after parallel between Abraham and Lot, but there's difference after difference after difference. And each one of these differences speak to a condition of heart in Lot versus the condition of Abraham's heart. I want to get to the condition of Abraham's heart, and I recognize that I have mostly the condition of Lot's heart, okay? That's full disclosure. I want to get from here to there. And there's going to be times where you just have to do it. You just have to grit your teeth and white knuckle it and just do it and pray to God for the grace of the condition of heart where this stuff, where the word is made flesh within us, where actual new covenant stuff actually happens. You know, everybody talks about it in the SEC, in the evangelical church. Yeah, we're new covenant believers. Well, go back and read Jeremiah 31 through 34 and actually look at what the new covenant's supposed to accomplish. I will write my Torah upon their hearts. The Torah being written upon our hearts is what new covenant looks like. For your consideration, for your own path, as you hopefully uproot yourself from the gates of Sodom and move towards the tents of Abraham. All right, I hope this has been a blessing and a challenge. And if it has, I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for your time.